Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board meeting. And let's get started
Recording in progress.
Welcome to the board meeting, and let's get started with the call to order.
Thank you, Chair. Before we begin, I'd like Director Meadows to make a statement on her participation this evening.
Yes, thank you. So I am appearing remotely pursuant to AB 2449 because I am unable to attend in person due to physical disability, which qualifies under the Americans with Disabilities Act. There is no any other individual 18 years or older present in the room at my remote location.
Thank you. And with that, I will begin with roll call. In person joining us, starting from my left, is Director Barbadillo.
Here.
Thank you. Fruin.
Here.
Scozola.
Here.
Showalter.
Here.
Walia.
Here.
Chair Tyson.
Here.
Vice Chair Klein.
Here.
Director Rennie.
Here.
Director Martinez-Beltran.
Here.
Joining remotely, Director Hilton.
Here.
Meadows.
Here.
Thank you. I'll note that currently we have Director Lee absent and Mekachek, but we do have a quorum of our board.
Great, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and move on to public comment on matters not listed on the agenda. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak on items not on the agenda? I don't see any in the room. Do we have any online?
None online, Chair.
Very good. In that case, let's move on to the consent calendar. And you can see a number of items here. Let's go ahead and start with a public comment on that. Do we have any public comment on the consent calendar? I do not see any in the room.
None online, Chair.
All right, very good. And, okay. And I did just get a text, so Director Mekachuk says he's here. Okay, very good, thank you. In that case, let's go ahead and take a look at the consent calendar, and then calendar. And are there any items that members wish to add any questions or discussion about? I do not see any, and I don't see any hands raised. So in that case, we'll take a look. Do we have any? And I didn't ask if anybody wanted to pull any items, so let me ask that now. I do not see that. So then let's look for a motion for approval.
Motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second, Rennie.
Okay, that was a speed contest there. Great. In that case, let's go ahead with the roll call vote.
Thank you. Chair Tyson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Klein.
Yes.
Scozola.
Aye.
Fruin.
Aye.
Rennie.
Aye.
Barbadillo.
Yes.
Martinez-Beltran.
Yes.
Showalter.
Yes.
Walia.
Yes.
Hilton.
Aye.
Meadows.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries.
Great, thank you. And that's quite an action-packed consent calendar. I really appreciate all the work that staff has done, and a lot of complexity to it. So we have had the chance to review these in different groups ahead of time, and so I'm glad to see that we're proceeding with all that. Let's move on to the regular calendar. Item number 2, the CEO report.
Good evening, Chair and Directors. So a few items to highlight from the CEO report. I hope you all had a chance to read it, and if you did and have any questions, feel free to ask. First, I want to make 2 important announcements. First is that we have offered a permanent job, and then she accepted, to one of our Climate Corps fellows, Kayla Kiefer. She is now going to be a permanent employee at SVCEA as an Energy Services Specialist. So we're excited to have her permanently with us forever. And then the second one is an existing employee that we have, Adam Pierce. He's been recently promoted to Senior Regulatory Analyst and Associate General Counsel. He was previously just Senior Regulatory Analyst. But Adam is an attorney, and he will be working alongside our General Counsel, Mike Callahan, on some legal matters and helping support that effort there. We're going to have Benna Chang provide an update, but first I'm going to go ahead and make a few other announcements. I want to congratulate the cities of Morgan Hill and the city of Gilroy and the county of Santa Clara. They were the recipients of the Metropolitan Transportation Commission Capital Program Implementation Grant for Charging Infrastructure Award. And so this, if you all recall, this was something that we asked all the members to participate back in October timeframe. We had a pretty short time frame, and there was some kind of limitations on what type of projects could be awarded. But both those cities and the county were awarded. We had agreed at that time that we would match 11.47% on whatever they got. And it is our understanding that we will be providing $136,266 to the city of Morgan Hill and $68,302 to the city of Gilroy. The county's projects that were that received the grants were not in our service territory, so we will not be matching those projects. But congratulations. Another big announcement. So we were the recipient of the Excellence in Public Information and Communications, otherwise known as EPIC, award presented by the California Association of Public Information Officials. Pam and her team were able to accept this award, and I believe it was for our work around the tiny home project. And then last thing I want to update you on is that yesterday we sent you an email. It was a Survey Monkey. It's not junk. It's actually something that we would like you to open up and provide us some feedback on how we might improve our communications with the board. As you're aware, we try to send useful information to the board, and we try to send it in different ways, but we would like to hear from you if there's more that you want to receive, less that you want to receive, or the form that you want to receive it in. So we'd appreciate you completing that survey. And then with that, I'm going to hand it over to our Director of Government and Legislative Affairs, Benna Cheng, to provide a brief update on what's happening in the federal government.
Thank you, Monica. Good evening, board. So as you have heard, on April 2nd, the president announced a baseline 10% tariff plus steep increases on tariffs on a wide swath of countries, including China and Southeast Asian countries that supply parts for renewable and transmission projects. This is, as you all know, a very dynamic and fast evolving situation. For example, earlier today, the president announced a 90-day pause on the tariffs over the 10% baseline tariff. The one exception is the president announced that China tariffs would increase to 125% from 104%. There are many factors that impact the cost of developing and procuring renewable resources. It's too early at this point to understand the full impacts of these tariffs on SVCE's future clean energy procurement efforts. But we're very closely monitoring the situation, and we'll keep the board informed about the impacts as we learn more. Happy to take any questions.
No questions from the board members? Oh, yes, go ahead.
Thank you for your report, CEO, and thank you, Director Chang, for sharing that information. So are there any specific steps that SVCE is taking right now with the massive fluctuation in terms of the policy changes that could be coming from the federal government, while meanwhile we are required per California state law to meet our obligations in so many ways? And that's an issue that you may recall I was talking with both of you yesterday as well. So what steps is SVCE taking, and what can the board of directors do?
Okay. So in terms of the main concern that we have is with respect to our power purchase agreements. And so in these power purchase agreements, whether it's these tariffs or anything else that happens in the world, face a lot of development risk, right? And so we signed a lot of these contracts back in 2018, 2019, and have already seen one wave of kind of global impacts on these contracts. So just like what happened back then and what happens all the times, we always monitor our contracts. And we have pretty solid contracts with tight contract provisions. So we'll continue to monitor them. I think really the impact is going to be on future contracts and the ones that we haven't negotiated yet, and what we might have to agree to in the future in terms of tariffs and higher prices. But as Benna mentioned, there are a lot of things that impact the price of renewable resources in California and in the country. This is certainly one of them, and any kind of uncertainty is bound to provide some kind of concern around how to price these resources. But you know, the biggest one that drives these things is just supply and demand. And there's a lot of supply, regardless of the federal executive orders or policy. There's still a lot of supply for renewable resources in California because of the mandates and because they just, quite frankly, make sense, and throughout the country. So We just see this as one more uncertainty that we have to monitor and make sure we plan for.
Thank you. Appreciate the work that you're doing.
Any other questions? No. Okay. Oh, Director Showalter.
I know in Mountain View, one of the things we're really concerned about is the tax exempt status of municipal bonds. And I'm not familiar with what kind of bonding we do at SVCE, but I just wondered how might that affect us?
Sure, and that is a mechanism that we use for our prepay deals. So it is really important for us that the municipal tax exempt bonds are preserved as well. And we were just up in DC last week talking about the items that were important to us with our congressional delegation, with key committee staff, and we definitely talked about municipal tax exempt bonds and the impact of tariffs, quite frankly, on our work. So, yeah.
Is there any advocacy you want us to do as directors?
Yes, we can definitely talk more about that, maybe sort of a one-on-one conversation. But I know, for example, that a lot of the cities and the counties have been talking about municipal tax exempt bonds in DC as well. So we know there's existing efforts that you guys are all a part of through your national trade associations too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Vice Chair Klein?
Yes, and kind of continuing on that, I know that the reconciliation discussions that are happening now conceivably affect the direct pay programs, and it's a tax rebate as opposed to tax exempt bonds. Do we have any related to that in the Inflation Reduction Act? And I know all that was tied kind of together a few years ago, but
Yes, that was definitely part of the Inflation Reduction Act and is part of the active conversation about whether or not they want to make any changes or include it in the budget reconciliation bill.
so do any of our projects currently utilize
no,
that we know
We
of?
do not.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Director Barbadilla.
Yes, just curious. Do we have any existing contracts that is China related? Any goods from them, service or anything like that existing?
Conceivably, yes. Many of the solar panel components in many of the projects that we've negotiated that are still haven't started construction or development, along with the battery components, much of that comes from China.
So what safety measures are we supposed to anticipate if the trade war just goes to forever?
Well, again, so a lot of this is still, I think there's a lot of volatility and activity happening right now. I think eventually things will settle down and the market will be able to understand how to really price these tariffs into their contracts going forward. Some contracts may have mechanisms that allow you to adjust should a certain tariff, gets linked, like indexed to a tariff. So there's an automatic change to the contract price with the tariff. We don't have that in any of our contracts right now. But we certainly, we have a lot of clean energy procurement to still do in order to meet our state mandates. And so I think it's going to be this next round of efforts that we make, not just SVCE, but all of the buyers in California that are going to have to struggle with the uncertainty around tariffs. And then again, more importantly, that's basically going to materialize as a price, right? So when developers feel unsure about how to price their product, they will include a premium in there so that they're covered at the end of the day. So we'll be creative and see what we can do on our end too to protect ourselves as well.
I think preparation is the key. Now that we know that there's something related to our procurements, to our future contracts and developments that's related to China, this will not go away in a heartbeat. So we must have some measures already. We probably have to define what are these projects, what are we expecting, and probably that's the way to define, to prepare. And yes, I agree. Also, we have to look at our contracts, through our board attorney. What, if ever, this volatile tariff trade war will have an effect on our existing contracts.
Mhm.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Well, thank you. I don't see any hands raised online, so thank you for that. Does that conclude the CEO report? Very good. Well, thank you. It was quite informative. Congratulations to Morgan Hill and Gilroy. And also, I think, Benna, we're going to want to keep hearing about this as time goes by. It's volatile. And then regarding that board communication survey, you know, if you ask 13 board members their opinion, we'll probably get, what's the old joke, at least 14 answers. But I think this is a good move to try to figure out what will accommodate us. And then let's go for public comment on the board, on the CEO report. Thank you. Seeing none in the room. Okay. Then we'll move on to item number 3, and that is the adopt SVCE's power purchase agreement project selection policy.
Great. Thank you, Chair. Benna Chang again, Director of Government and Legislative Affairs. So today we are bringing to the board a formal power purchase agreement, or PPA, project selection policy. So as background, our current practice in the PPA selection process requires renewable developers to use prevailing wage, which can be satisfied by execution of a project labor agreement, or PLA. The formal PPA policy before you tonight will guide staff when selecting PPA projects to recommend for the board's approval. The policy contains a set of aspirational goals and preferences and will go into effect for all future solicitations. Before we get into the details of the proposed policy, we just wanted to set some context for the board. As you know, power supply is a very highly regulated industry. SVCE has a wide variety of legislative and regulatory mandates to comply with. These can be extremely complex and include very prescriptive procurement orders. SVC also needs to maximize the value of our power purchase agreement contracts to both help with affordability for customers and to stay competitive in an extremely tight renewable market. As you know, the energy market is currently a seller's market, and SVC has to compete in this market not just with other CCAs, but with the IOUs, municipal utilities, and direct access providers. The more we constrain ourselves with policies that other load-serving entities like the IOUs and municipal utilities don't have, the more challenging it is for us in the market. That being said, staff recognizes that there are important policies that can be reflected in a PPA selection policy. And the policy in your packet today includes direction from the February Executive Committee meeting and really balances policy objectives in ways that are deliverable and enforceable by staff, while providing staff with the flexibility to deliver the best value for SVC's customers. So the proposed policy before you covers several topic areas, including workforce standards, environmental stewardship, technology diversification, and location. SVC has had extensive conversations with stakeholders on this proposed policy. We have listed here the folks that we have met with during this process. We have very much appreciated a productive dialogue with the stakeholders and took a wide variety of changes to the original policy that went to Executive Committee last year in response to the feedback that we got from the community. Some of the changes that we took include changes around the workforce standard language, environmental stewardship, community engagement. We added some language around CC power, and then reporting. The final item on this slide is really board direction from last year, which is to add a GHG emissions evaluation to our policy and procurement process. As I mentioned at the February Executive Committee, the committee gave staff direction to include 3 additional changes to the policy. The first one was around local hire. The committee asked staff to research an appropriate target goal and to add that into the policy. The second was around workforce pipeline programs hire. Again, the direction was to research an appropriate target goal and add that to the policy. And then finally, the Executive Committee directed staff to add apprentices to the median priority preference under workforce standards. So we worked with Working Partnerships, really wanted to thank them for their partnership on this, to research project labor agreements in the surrounding communities. And we used the median from the data to propose a 30% local hire goal and a 5% workforce pipeline program hire goal. And these targeted goals are reflected in the proposed policy before you today. So with that, the request is for the board to adopt the Power Purchase Agreement project selection policy as laid out in Attachment 1.
Great, thank you for that report. Let's start with questions from board members. Let's start off with Director Walia.
Thank you, Chair. Before I ask the question, I would like to share, I know I shared with Benna and with Monica yesterday that the stakeholders group had reached out to me and I did talk to them. So just wanted to disclose that. My question of you, Benna, is that what are the gaps? Because we have done multiple iterations on this at this time. And even after the last executive committee meeting a few weeks ago, staff has taken another stab at it. So what are the gaps between what has been presented in the staff report versus what the stakeholder group is asking for?
Sure, great question. So board members have all received the comment letter from the stakeholders that outline the different asks. There are 2 left. And then we also have 2 slides that we can show with red lines, so you can see the difference between the staff proposed policies and what the stakeholders are asking for. So if you like, we can walk through those very quickly. But I do want to mention, I know the stakeholders are here tonight, and we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to comment more deeply on their proposed changes as well. So as staff understands, the stakeholders are asking for 2 additional things. One is to account for environmental impacts for earlier stage projects and how those earlier stage projects might get a preference under the environmental stewardship section. And then the second change that they've asked for is around community engagement also for those earlier stage projects.
Thank you. So I also saw in the staff report there's a reference to on page 3 of the staff report, item number 3, additional changes, right at the bottom. It refers to project life cycle. So can you help us understand what are the stages in the project life cycle and specifically where we as SVCE have control and what they are asking for? Just, you don't have to put anything out there, just
Sure.
in very simple words, so that we can understand when they are saying specifically early stage, what are they asking for specifically?
I don't want to speak for the stakeholders, but staff's intention in the original language is to cover the entire project life cycle. So the language there talks about both the entitlement and the construction process. And in staff's understanding of the entitlement process, we really mean all the stages of work that happen leading up to entitlement, including entitlement, and then throughout the construction phase of the project.
And typically, SVCE gets involved at what stage? We are not the developer, right?
Yeah, we typically come in at, we could come in at any point, right? It could be a late stage project, it could be an earlier project. It really just depends on when the offer comes in the solicitation.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions for now. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? I don't see, are there any questions on the, I don't see any there. All right, in that case, let's look for some public comment, which, oh, I'm sorry, was there another hand up?
Oops.
Oh, there he is, okay. Yeah, Director Mekachek, sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah, will we have an opportunity to ask questions after we hear from the folks that are going to make comments?
Yes, when we go to board member comments, we can of course ask questions then too.
Perfect. So I'll wait until that point in time.
Okay. All right. In that case, let's go for public comment.
All right, we've received one in-person public comment speaker request from Luis A. from Working Partnerships.
All right, thank you. Good evening, board members. Louise Auerhahn with Working Partnerships. And Working Partnerships is a community organization here in Santa Clara County, and we work to lift up the voices of all of our region's diverse communities on issues that impact them. And I particularly am passionate about this item because one of my longtime focus areas has been construction careers. I've worked on project labor agreements and targeted hiring policies throughout the region, and I founded the Trades Orientation Program, through which we've supported over 600 of our community members to get into family supporting construction careers. And these power purchase agreements offer a tremendous opportunity to create thousands more of those high road construction careers for California. Careers where our community members can build clean energy to power our neighborhoods. That's super exciting. But as we all know, that doesn't happen automatically. In my work, I've also seen what happens in market segments where this isn't made a priority and construction ends up being a race to the bottom. You end up with endemic wage theft, frightening health and safety issues, and shoddy practices that end up doing long-term damage to the products. So I'm really happy to see SVCE moving so thoughtfully forward with a policy that will lift up these priorities and practices, and that sends a signal to project developers of what you're looking for, projects that invest in their communities and their workforce for the long term. So I strongly support the proposed policy, including the 2 elements that are recommended in the public comment letter. And those projects speak primarily to when you receive an offer for an earlier stage project. So keeping in mind this whole policy is a bid preference. So when you put out a request for offers, you'll get an offer. It might be for a project that's already in the entitlement phase, or it might be for an earlier project. And what we want to do is ensure that those earlier projects also have the chance to demonstrate that we have made these specific commitments to environmental impacts and addressing them. We have made these specific commitments, and we have developed a plan and a strategy and started reaching out to the community. We think that whatever stage projects are at, they should have the opportunity to demonstrate that they will do these things and get the preference points and compete on equal footing. And we've included some suggested language in case it's helpful, but those are our 2 main points: to consider environmental impacts for earlier stage projects if you receive such an offer, and similarly community engagement plans for earlier stage projects. So many thanks, and hopefully this will be a step towards building an equitable, clean energy future for all of us.
Great, thank you, Louise. Appreciate that. Any other public comment?
None in person. Online, I have 2 hands raised. We'll start with Bradley C., followed by Eric V.
Great.
Bradley, whenever you are ready, you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Bradley Cleveland. I'm an Oakland resident, and I'm also a consultant with IBEW Local 595. I want to speak in support of this policy. Specifically, I want to support the policy's strong workforce and environmental standards and the role this policy will play in terms of workforce development. This policy demonstrates your commitment to the local workforce and the local community, and it will increase opportunities for apprentices, because we need these skilled workers as we electrify our economy and our communities. It will draw these apprentices and skilled electricians from this region, because we need to expand the number of good-paying jobs in this high-cost area. And it will invest in historically disadvantaged communities by creating a pipeline into these high-road jobs through targeted hire. I had to say I worked in the Bay Area with Ava Community Energy, which had adopted a similar policy in early 2024. And I had to say, not only is it a good policy, but I think it opened the door for a more cooperative relationship between AVA and its community and labor partners. And I believe this will have long-term benefits to this relationship. And I assume that the same will be true in Silicon Valley. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Up next, we have Eric V. Eric, whenever you are ready.
Thank you. Board members, my name is Eric Viam, and I am co-director of the CCA Workforce Environmental Justice Alliance. And I just want to start by thanking your board and your staff for the collaborative effort that was undertaken in the development of this policy. We're happy with the outcome of it and encourage your support this evening. Just a couple things that I'd like to share with you with respect to, first of all, just sharing that about a week ago, Sonoma Clean Power adopted their version of the policy, which we were very happy with. And that was a unanimous vote of their board. And CEO Jeff Cipher has approached us afterwards asking for to work together on a joint press release to celebrate what we had accomplished together. And so we just want to share that that's really the standard for us in terms of what success looks like. And we hope that we can achieve that with your board and staff this evening as well. And then just a couple things I wanted to comment on. In terms of the provisions that we asked for as amendments in our comment letter, in terms of inclusion of earlier stage considerations in both environmental stewardship and community engagement, we feel that these are very realistic amendments, and that we have examples from numerous CCAs that have adopted these provisions in their policies and then also have implement them in their requests for offers and their procurement process. One example, of course, is Clean Power Alliance, which has been conducting procurement using very similar standards to what we have before you this evening. And in their RFO questionnaires, they have that address these sorts of earlier stage projects. Like, for example, have you identified opposition within the project area, community opposition of any sort? Are there any groups? Have you, undertaken environmental reviews, and have you identified potential mitigants for those issues? And so, like I said, we have existing models that have been very successful, and call on you this evening to integrate those amendments into the policy. And we again appreciate the collaborative effort, and look forward to continue to work together in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. Up next, we have Tim F. Tim, whenever you're ready.
Yes, this is Tim Frank, and I'm also a representative of the Workforce and Environmental Justice Alliance, and am bringing to that work my collaboration with the Construction Trades Workforce Initiative and the Building Trades. And we're very supportive of the efforts to assure that we have a combination of projects that are good for labor, good for the environment, and good for social justice, and are proud of the partners that we've embraced in the context of this campaign, and really appreciate the fact that you're considering a policy that is, moving the needle on all of these fronts. I just wanted to build a little bit on the comments on the habitat conservation plans. This is something that's actually been consistently embraced by the CCAs that we have already worked with on this. And we feel this is essentially a best practice. What we're talking about is a way to, a commitment on how to mitigate endangered species impacts. A best practice is actually in the circumstance where you have an existing habitat conservation plan that covers the area, and that's something that's been agreed to by U.S. Fish and Wildlife, the State Department of Fish and Game, typically the local jurisdiction. And if you make a commitment to simply follow the programmatic approach that's specified by that habitat conservation plan for mitigating, then it reduces your risk, and it's a way to avoid a conflict later in the game. So it's a best practice in that regard, and it also has environmental benefits, because when more and more players actually utilize the habitat conservation plan as the means of mitigating their endangered species obligations, then it allows that plan to actually do things like stitch together wildlife corridors and things like that, involve sort of programmatic mitigation that is more efficient. It gives you higher value for lower cost. And we think that that is something that we would like to see the entire industry embracing as a norm, because that's actually how you get the best practice. I mean, the best outcomes. And it does a better job both of addressing the environmental needs and also of containing your costs. So we think this is something that shouldn't get much pushback from developers, and we think it's a good practice, and encouraging that good practice in the context of your RFOs is just a smart play. So with that, I'd like to thank you. We really appreciate your attention to these issues, and I look forward to the deliberation.
Thank you, Tim. And there are no additional hands raised for this item, Chair.
Great, thanks very much. I'll bring it back to the board members for comments. Before that, let me just echo a little bit what the Director Walia said. And so I did meet with Louise, Tim, and Eric on Thursday last week to discuss all of this in more detail. So with that, who would like to have a comment on this? Well, I'll get to Brian. Okay, let me go with Director Klein, and then I'll go to Director Mekachuk.
Yes, so thank you. Can you pull up the additional red lines? And just for the record, I met with working partners in that group 2 months ago now, I think, approximately. So it's been a while as far as that's concerned. From an environmental impact standpoint, I'm just trying to get a better idea. Actually, do the second page first. Do the second item. So the concept here of a pre-entitlement versus entitlement, I don't see the difference because, ultimately through the entitlement process, it's pre-entitlement. So
that's correct.
Adding that phrase in here, and also demonstrate commitment. I'm trying to see from an enforcement standpoint how this would play out. And pre-entitlement to me means that they're starting engagement during the entitlement process as opposed to entitlement. And I don't see the distinction between those. Can staff clarify?
Sure. The staff has the same viewpoint that you just expressed, that when we say the entitlement process, we mean to also include all the activities that you would go through to get to the entitlement process. So we think the intent of what our language is the same as what the advocates have been asking for here as well. And then we would implement this item in the same way, regardless of which version of the language is there.
Okay. And so is staff in favor of this language change, or doesn't see that it actually makes a difference on what was originally proposed?
We don't think this is a substantive change from our perspective. Again, we would implement it the same way. For example, the difference between commit and demonstrate commitment, really we would be asking the developers the same thing, that you would have to show us how you would either have engaged with the community or plan on engaging with the community throughout that entire entitlement process and the construction process.
Okay, thank you. And then going back to the previous one, just trying to get a better idea of how this would change our process. I'm assuming as they're going through the entitlement process, we're requiring them to define what mitigation they're going to deal with the impacts of these projects. And also, so a similar sort of question, would this change our process dramatically? Yeah.
So this one is a material change, unlike the second item that we were just talking about. So again, the language from the stakeholders is really about earlier projects that are earlier in the development process. So for example, the staff proposed language is that top part in black. And what we would be asking the developers to do is to show us that they have an enforceable development agreement, which happens at the end, right? So these earlier stage projects wouldn't have had that enforceable development agreement. Staff's review of this language from the stakeholders gives us some pause, really from an implementation and enforcement perspective. The language here is pretty high level and vague, and it's particularly this language about where the developer has adequately assessed likely impacts and addressed potential mitigants. We think that if a project is in an area with a habitat conservation plan, that's pretty straightforward, but we recognize that habitat conservation plans are not in place throughout all parts of the state. So there could conceivably be a project that's proposed that does not have an applicable habitat conservation plan. If that were to happen, then it comes back to the language of that the developer has adequately assessed likely impacts. And as staff, we don't have the expertise on environmental mitigation to know if a project has adequately assessed those likely impacts or has not. And so the staff's proposed language, again, the one in black, really is very clear and enforceable from our perspective, which is why we included that in the original proposal.
Okay, I appreciate that, because ultimately what we're trying to do here is exactly that, trying to make sure that it's well defined for those development projects that we're looking to partner with and move forward. So that clarifies that. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Director Mekachuk?
Thank you. I've been to at least 4 ribbon cuttings, and I believe everyone on the board knows it's at least 10 years from concept to ribbon cutting. And when you go to these ribbon cuttings, they're quite an event because all the people that have been involved and the stakeholders are all there, and they're telling the story of their journey. And when for example, I was at Kern County, I was at Mammoth. I can't remember the place that's east of Death Valley in the western part of Arizona, and then at the east of Palm Springs. And the Bureau of Land Management was at all of those, and you could hear how the developers had to go through the process, regardless of who the operator ultimately ends up being. But so I know that, or I believe that there's a lot of due diligence and a lot of work that goes into making sure that all the concerns are addressed. And as Dennis said earlier, this is a seller's market. And I think SVCE should be relatively easy to do business with and appreciate what the process has been going through this. And staff has worked hard on this and collaborated. So I would support staff's recommendation going forward. Let's keep it relatively simple and so that we can hold the developers accountable, not just having it sort of difficult to deal with. So I'll be supporting the proposal as submitted by staff.
Thank you, Director. Director Walia?
Thank you, Chair Tyson. So, firstly, I want to thank the stakeholders group for their efforts, all their efforts working with SVCE staff over an extended period of time. And I also appreciate that you're saying we are very close. We have come such a distance. So it's good to hear that. I look at it that staff has worked over the course of more than 12 months specifically on this policy. It came to the exec committee last summer or close to that, and has taken multiple it's taken multiple iterations to bring it to where it is today. It is imperative that SVCE focuses on its mission. Nothing new there. You may recall some of the questions I was asking in the prior item, the CEO update, regarding the uncertainty with the additional uncertainty with the fundamental changes that are happening in the business environment from angles that we are not even aware of that could happen. So it's all the more important for SVCE to focus on what we need to do, what we do best, and have a balanced approach to everything, as well as keeping the flexibility so that we can do the right things. I agree with what has been said by Vice Chair Klein, as well as by my colleague, Director Mekachuk. And for those reasons, I actually think we have reached a point where we have almost met everything that the stakeholders group has been asking for. And I am very comfortable in supporting staff recommendation, and that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Director Showalter.
I haven't been involved in this policy discussion the whole time, I don't think. At least I wasn't really aware of it until the last week or so. But I always like to review the goals when we get to the end to kind of make sure that's what we're still doing. And these are the goals that I've sort of gleaned, and I just want to check with staff, is that for this environmental review, am I on target and understanding one? One is we want to reduce the risk that any environmental issues would have to completing the project successfully. That's a business case, right? We want to do the business case. And then the other thing is, the other one is we want to reduce harm. We want to be as environmentally protective as we can possibly be. Those are the two goals, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that when we go back to these goals, it's quite, you could do that with either versions. But I think it's important for us to just remember that those are the goals. Reduce the risk for the business case and protect the environment as much as possible. And these things are so complicated, and on the ground they're so complicated. You know, what species are involved, you know, all that sort of thing, that you know, you really have to evaluate them on a case-by-case basis. And that's not going to change, because that's just the nature of the beast. So I just wanted to go back to the goals. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Director Scazola.
Thank you, Chair Tyson. I wanted to say I also have spoken with some of the stakeholders. I did have a specific question. I was curious about if SCVE is interested in a particular project, depending on where it's at, let's say it's halfway through the process or later, how do we review the environmental stewardship at that point? Are we just gonna, like, what records, how would we know that this is a project that we feel is up to our standards if it's halfway through or later?
Right, great question. So staff's proposed policy includes environmental stewardship. There's actually 2 items that are listed. Maybe we can pull up the amendment language as well. That will kind of help with the discussion. So the first one is that the proposed project is on urban or previously disturbed site, and this language around where the developer and local land use authority have established an enforceable development agreement. So those are the 2 criteria you would need to meet in order to get a preference under the environmental stewardship section.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate it.
I don't see any other comments. I don't see any hands raised. Oh, there's one. Director Hilton.
Thank you. Thank you to the stakeholders and staff and the executive committee. So I just want to just highlight a couple of things that the stakeholders are trying to get through. And, you know, like staff said initially, you know, this is a place that we can state our aspirational goals. And I think that calling out specifically to do meaningful pre-entitlement work, whether it's environmental stewardship or community engagement in these jurisdictions help. And like Director Megachek said, some of these things have taken 10 years, and you finally see all the positive effects. But what I'm worried about is maybe those individuals that want to do projects with us that do not have developer agreements, but they're pitching it to us. And this sometimes happens on the council level with us, where someone pitches a great idea, and it sounds great, but then when you really start doing the work, you realize it's just not possible. So I think what they're trying to do is make sure that maybe those developers that aren't as experienced as us, or use the same terminology, entitlement, pre-entitlement, because I agree with you. When I hear I'm working on entitlement, that means pre-entitlement. If they have entitlement, it means after. So I just want to call out, those two things. I do support the language because I believe that it's, it's our stated goals, it's aspirational goals. I don't really look at this as something that staff has to really worry about getting too deeply involved with. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Director. And then Director Meadows.
Yes, thank you. I wasn't actually sure, though this is your job as chair, which Director Hilton was saying he agreed with, but I'll leave you that to follow up. I will support staff's recommendations for the wording for all the things that my colleagues have said. I do want to say in the one case where it wasn't a substantive difference, and this borders on or is wordsmithing, which I tend not to do, but I don't like that commit or commitment to or whatever. Just say meaningfully engage the community. You don't have to say whether you're committing to it or not. By listing it, we're doing it, and that gets rid of all that extra words and avoids wordsmithing it, but doing other wordsmithing. Anyway, so I appreciate the explanations, and I will support the staff recommended wording.
Great, thank you. Director Martinez Beltran.
Thank you, Chair. I think in looking at this, at first I was okay with both of the short editions, but I do see, in hearing about the about the community engagement, that there's, people are saying, okay, entitlement, pre-entitlement. I could be satisfied with that. I do think with number 1, however, that we are an environmentally conscious group and organization. And because of that, I think I would feel more comfortable with delineating, and spelling out in earlier stages. And I tend to agree with Director Hilton on that point. And so I would love to see us at least move forward with number 1's edition. That would be my contribution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director. I don't see any other comments. I'll just say that I'll echo what I've heard before, and that is I really appreciate the participation, the quality of this effort. It took extra time, but I think we do have those same goals. We want environmentally sound projects that work for us, and that also have that role in the training of the workforce of the future. I think those are common ones. And I do think that we're sort of wordsmithing the margins, that the overall approach here has been very successful and positive. So that's my comment. Let's go on with Director Lee.
I do want clarification. Is it working? Hello? Checking. 1, 2. That doesn't like to be on.
Green light.
Try your mic here. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Okay, here we go. I just want to confirm, do we actually have a motion yet? Or no?
We do
have
not.
No motion. 1 second. We're just getting comments?
We're just getting comments so far, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly, I would like to speak to see what motion we're coming up with, and I would say this is certainly a policy that, true to our name, right, is very much to what we want to do for the environment moving forward. And I want to thank staff for the hard work on putting all this great work together, and also the important engagement and feedback. I believe those stakeholders spoke with all of us, and I've been engaged for disclosure. We've spoken with them as well, and so, and I think it's something that if our fellow CCAs are adopting policy, we certainly do help signal to the market what type of projects we want to see, and that would of course lead to more sustainable and better projects with strong community engagement becoming more of the norm. So I would certainly like to go with the flow. I mean, obviously, it needs to be something that staff understand how to enforce this. If they don't know how to move forward to make it work, then the language is empty. So I just want to make sure that this is something that we are, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that we are saying the same things. And I just want to say thank you for staff for putting hard work together. And I do want to thank the stakeholders for engaging. Every one of us has been engaging on this issue for the past week or so. And I just want to say thanks for the outreach and the time it takes to get to where we're at today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And back to Director Martinez Beltran.
I didn't disclose, and I just wanted to share that I have also spoke with the
Okay.
the organization. Thank you.
Great. I think we've heard comments. So I think we're seeing a range, a little bit of opinions. So I'm just going to say, let's see. Oh,
I've got a motion, Chair, if you'd like me to share with it and see if we can get that passed.
all right. I tell you, before that motion, let's go ahead with Director Mekachuk. Is that what that hand is
Thank
for?
you.
Okay.
Yes, I put my hand up to make a motion.
Oh. Well, I think if your hand was up, I'm going to go ahead and hear it.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to adopt SVCE's power purchase agreement project selection policy as set forth by staff.
Second.
What's it? We heard a second, yes. Uh-huh.
Who was the second?
Yes, Scazola was a second. All right, so Director Rennie, yeah?
I just want to be clear. So set forth by staff means not the red parts, correct?
That's right.
That is correct.
Yes. Let's go with the roll call.
Thank you. Chair Tyson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Klein,
Yes.
Scozola,
Aye.
Fruin,
Aye.
Rennie,
Aye.
Barbadillo,
Aye.
Martinez Beltran.
Sorry, are we not going to have a substitute motion?
If this fails, then we'll have a substitute motion.
Okay, no.
Thank you. Showalter,
Yes.
Lee,
Aye.
Walia,
Aye.
Hilton,
No.
Meadows,
Aye.
Mekachuk.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries with 11 yes and 2 no.
Great, thank you. Thank you again to staff. Thank you for the stakeholders. Let's go ahead and get a comment from Director Walia.
I appreciate that. I don't like to do that. But in the discussion, one of the things I think we should all feel very good about is the extensive amount of work that SVCE has been doing regarding the workforce. I mean, look at the staff report, page 1. It would take me 5 minutes to just go through that. I'm not going to do it. All I'm saying is we should really feel proud about the work that SVCE has been doing, both the environmental stewardship, but as well as the really the most important, the workforce development, the local workforce development. So just wanted to highlight that. Thank you so
Great,
much.
thank you. Yes. Well, let's move on then to item number 4, which has to do with the executing a contract with King's Community Action Organization, etc.
Tyson, before we get started, I
please.
just
Feel
forgot to mention in my CEO report that, and this is somewhat related to this item, but that we have a ribbon cutting event next week for the Hanford Gas Peaker / clean battery facility. It's on the 17th. You're all welcome to attend. I know some of you are going to attend, and we hope to see more folks there. And so it's very fitting that we're talking about this tonight as well. So coincident that it all kind of came together.
Coincidences. We're supposed to believe that.
No, for real. We didn't plan this.
Good planning. Okay. Good evening, directors. Pamela Leonard, Deputy Director of Marketing and Communications, and I'm joined by.
Good evening. My name is Julia Pasquale, Community Outreach Specialist, and just here to support Pam with any questions.
Okay. So this evening we are going to discuss the Hanford mitigation goals and guidelines, do a little review about what it is that the board has established that's brought us to this recommendation of funding local organizations working in Kings County. And yeah, we'll go from there. So the proposal this evening is to delegate authority to the CEO to execute these contracts with these 2 organizations. You can see the amounts here. And to give some background, the Hanford Mitigation Fund is a set of guidelines that, the Hanford Mitigation Fund guidelines, I should say, were something that was required when the board approved a power purchase agreement with the Hanford Hybrid Natural Gas Power Plant and a battery energy storage system. And that the fund specified that we were going to use the funding to help find programs in the local community to mitigate emissions from this project. And of course, this is because SVCE really does care about leaving a positive impact with all of the work that we do. And just a little reminder about this Hanford plant. This is a hybrid, it's a natural gas peaker plant that has been in existence. It's an existing facility, and the exciting opportunity SVCE contracted for is adding a new battery energy storage system to this facility. This gives us a lot of benefits to meet our midterm reliability procurement requirements as well as resource adequacy obligations. And you can see here that what a big benefit of adding the battery storage to this plant does is that the battery, which is grid charged with abundant clean solar energy during the day, would be called upon and discharged first before utilizing the gas peaker plant. This is expected to lower the emissions of the facility over time, and it's demonstrating the clean, affordable, and reliable balancing act that we have to play as an organization, because we do recognize that as we're in this transition period as a state to meet our 100% clean goals, we do need to have reliability facilities and have this natural gas fleet online for some time. So it's a really great project. And a little bit more about the plant's location. So Hanford is in Kings County in the San Joaquin Valley. And really a takeaway here is that the majority of the county has designated disadvantaged communities as designated by the state. Okay, these are the approved guidelines that the board adopted last year, and we're just focusing on items 4 through 6. So we thought that it would be super important to ensure that we are hearing from the community in Hanford and in Kings County what type of programs would be most beneficial, what are the desires of the community as it relates to energy and emissions reductions. And then using this feedback, hearing directly from the local community is how we then are coming to these recommendations. And of course, specifically need to make sure that these programs are being directed to the low-income or disadvantaged communities there. So a little bit about our outreach, which Julia is here because she led this effort and can help, in the answers or question and answer period. But we reached out to half a dozen organizations, and we focused on, the first two are the ones we were, suggesting this evening because they have really, really strong energy-specific programs. The other two were just really, really insightful, interesting conversations because these organizations also have health-related or job training or economic development programs that the common theme with all of them is that they all care very much about making sure that their communities are not left behind and get to participate in this clean energy transition that's happening across the state. We also discovered that one of the organizations, so King's Community Action Organization, they lead a community needs assessment, and it's a really large effort that incorporates a lot of different organizations and groups throughout the county. So there's public health, education, job training, and judicial, and you name it. So it's a really widespread view of different organizations and reaching all kinds of people throughout the county to understand what their priorities are. And this was done very recently in just January of this year. And you can see right here, number one, utilities assistance is one of their top concerns. And we were looking at the county priorities and just looking at what our fund priorities are and just kind of thinking about, they don't necessarily have to match up and be exact, but how can they really be complementary? How can our lens help serve the needs of the community and the programs that we were looking for? So the recommendation is we have these two organizations because they have two distinct program areas. The first is for weatherization, and the next is some various electrification initiatives. Starting with King's Community Action Organization, they're an anti-poverty organization. They're focused on all kinds of services for income-qualified customers. This includes early childhood education and development programs, food and nutrition services, and then utility bill assistance and weatherization. They've been around for 60 years. They're also based in Hanford. And the existing weatherization program, this is a program that's funded with Department of Energy funds. They have received their funding already for 2025. And we did see that they did have a little bit of less reach from prior years. And so the incremental funding that we are proposing this evening would help them reach 100 households, help meet that need in the community around utility bills specifically, because weatherization increases efficiency of homes, which leads to lower bills. So more energy efficiency, and also every electron saved is one you don't have to produce, and so there's also that benefit to the grid and to customer bills. And Self-Help Enterprises, they're a community development organization. They do serve 9 counties throughout the San Joaquin Valley, but they have a strong presence in Kings County. And their main mission really is they're an affordable housing developer, and they help other families find housing. And again, that was one of those top community needs that was identified. And they have really, really relevant experience as it relates to the SVCE mission, because they have been the outreach partner for 2 CPUC-funded pilot programs focused on electrification. And they just have a ton of experience and learnings that I will talk about next. So the proposed programs for electrification with Self-Help Enterprises, there's 3 areas. One is the Community Energy Navigators, and this is it's hiring members of the local community to do electrification outreach and education. Through their pilot programs that they had run already, they found that there's a lot of funding out there for actually doing electrification for the equipment swaps, the upgrades, but the need was the ongoing education of the homeowners to make sure they're operating equipment in the way that will give them long-lasting the benefits. So time of use rate optimization, so bills don't become higher. In the case of some multifamily properties, ensuring maintenance of equipment is done so that the equipment is still running efficiently, like with heat pump water heaters, there's certain things. So working with that, that's one model. And then they have an existing affordable housing property in Hanford, and they would like to electrify that community center and use that as an electrification awareness education center for that community. And they also have a new planned affordable housing community in Corcoran, which is just, it's another community over from Kings County, and looking to also electrify the community space there. And so this, because it's a longer term engagement, because they have a new property that is to be built, this is why this one is a 5-year engagement versus the 2-year for the other proposal. And they again really felt that this gap in funding exists around the need to just have ongoing education in the community for the benefits of electrification. And I already talked about all of these, but so you can see here a bit more detail around each of those program areas that are in the projects, and the total cost over 5 years. So this is the total amount, not the amount each year, but the total amount over 5 years that is being proposed for Self-Help Enterprises and their suite of electrification, education, as well as these like capital retrofit projects in 2 of their communities. So our next steps here is seeking the authority of the boards for our CEO to begin the contracting process with these organizations. We will work with them to identify what sort of evaluation criteria makes the most sense for example, education and outreach. How are we going to want to measure that through pre and post surveys, attendees, number of events? We'll figure all that out. We also have invited, if we are able to move forward with these groups, would love to have them be present at the ribbon cutting, since it is a local event for them. And the board, as required by the guidelines, we would come back annually with a report on an update on how things are going. And one other part here is that we do find that these organizations, they've both been around for 60 years. They have a strong track record. They have a positive reputation in the community, and they're very complementary programs. As we spoke with King's Community Action Organization doing the weatherization work, they told us that members of their community are a bit reluctant and think negatively of electrification because they are unfamiliar or hearing misinformation. And then you have this other group working in the same community that's talking about how there's all these benefits and they have all these learnings. And so we just feel like we're really getting the full spectrum of where we are realistically in our electrification movement, and we're seeing that here as well. And there's a lot that we can learn in our own programs. We want to reach low-income customers. We do have direct install program that we're trying to get out there. So we can learn a lot. It's also complementary. We have existing, we have weatherization services that will be part of what we promote in our affordability outreach work. That's a a state-funded benefit or resource to our own customers. So we just really wanted to highlight how complementary it was that we found these organizations doing work that we fully support here in our own territory. And, the last point here is that the fund is 1.8 million, but we're only asking for 1.5 tonight, so we aren't exhausting or committing the full amount, and so that still kind of gives us some flexibility in the future as to what we want to do as we evaluate these ongoing partnerships.
Great, thank you for that report. Let's take board member questions. Start with that. Do we have any board member questions? I do not see any. I do not see any hands raised. Let's go for public comment. I do not see any public comment in the room. No? Oh, okay. And then we'll bring it back to the board for either comments, questions, or musings, maybe?
Sure.
Let's start with Vice Chair Klein.
Thank you. A question. So from a weatherization standpoint, I love the concept that they're focusing on. Have we looked at any of those types of programs within our own district from that standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've incorporated efficiency measures into some of the new programs that have recently launched and will be more widely promoted in coming months. So the full service home upgrades program, there are efficiency measures that customers can take advantage of through that program. We also have DIY energy savings toolkits that are available in all of your libraries, where there's weather stripping that customers can use and take advantage of, and various efficiency measures. That's actually a program that we had inherited from the county some years ago and continue to this day, and we find that it is very well utilized. We actually just had to put more toolkits out into the community last year. Anything? I think that's it. Yeah.
And I appreciate that, because definitely we focus on decarbonization, electrification, but at the end of the day, it's how much energy they're using, and going to the basics, especially kind of moving the needle in some of these communities that aren't ready to take a bigger step. Mm-hmm. I think that has a very positive impact. So thank you for coming up with reaching these two different programs and bringing them to our board. I think it's making that positive impact, like we want to do with all the projects, but especially Hanford, which is moving forward. So, with that, I'm ready to make a motion whenever you want.
Great. We'll take a comment from Director Mekachuk, and then Walia, and then Scazola.
I'd like to say that this was pretty exciting when we heard about it for the first time almost a year ago. We approved the plan, and now we're looking at funding it. So be nice to approve the funding. And what's going to be really exciting, and I'm looking forward to hearing the results of actually dispersing the funds. So this is I think very innovative, and I look forward to that next step, hearing how the funds were used and the benefits of that.
Great. Director Walia?
Thanks to staff.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to make a quick remark following up on the question that Vice Chair asked. Pam, you mentioned the toolkits in the libraries. Talking of communication, can you please send us an email on that? That would be helpful. Okay, now on this item, agenda item itself, there was an extensive conversation at the executive committee meeting, and we all supported it. It's very exciting to see the work, how we engage with the community, and I'm intentionally using those words because that's exactly what we were talking of in the prior agenda item, how we sign our PPAs. It's great to have that policy, which we all approved. I also want to reiterate that even without some of those specific language written into our policy, we take pride at SVCE to talk about, and not just talk, but to actually implement these. And this is the perfect example which shows how we execute this. So I feel very good about the work we do here, and of course I will be supporting this. Can't resist it. I keep on seeing this again. I noticed it in the exec committee meeting. You can't go wrong with a company called SHEC. Of course, it's got to work. But really, staff has done a phenomenal job of finding both the organizations and all the details you have developed. Thank you. So I will be supporting this, and I'll be happy to second the motion whenever the vice chair makes that.
Okay. First, though, we're going to hear from Director Scazola.
Thank you, Chair. As I said at the executive committee, this one really gave me the feels. I mean, SVCE has so much to be proud of, but this seems like everything's coming together. We're really showing that we're committed to the community. I love the fact that not only did you ask the stakeholders, okay, these are our values, what do you guys need in the community? And you found that perfect intersection there. The weatherization just makes perfect sense. So I love that that came together. And I also want to thank staff for recommending that there be regular reporting. We want these programs to be as effective as possible. So I really appreciate that as well. Thank you guys. You nailed it, like home run.
Director Showalter.
Yeah, I just wanted to add too that it's really valuable that it's 5 years. Nonprofits spend a lot of time chasing money. And so when they have something they can count on for 5 years, they can really sink their teeth into doing the program and not just, looking for grants and writing the final report. So, I think this longevity of it is particularly valuable, and I'm delighted to see it.
Director Barbadillo.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question. So do we have any oversight program to monitor these funds being spent by the two organizations that we have mentioned?
Yeah, our typical contracting process will require monthly invoicing, so we're going to be paying for time and materials of work that has been done. We're just now seeking the authority to enter into those conversations, and so I think we'll see if for like capital projects, we'll have to figure out if there are any upfront asks of them, if it's for materials or what have you. So that'll be to be determined, but for the most part, definitely we are going to be requiring as part of the reporting as like our mutually agreed upon metrics of showing what it is they're doing, the events that they're doing, and how many people they're reaching. We will ensure that there's oversight of that.
So we do not have metrics yet, and we're trying to approve the 1.5 million?
Correct. We are seeking the authority to enter into the contracting because it was direction that we wanted to ensure that the board was supportive of the specific programs that we have chosen before we spend however long it may take to go through contracting and spending the time of these nonprofits who we haven't worked with before, right? This is a new thing. We have not partnered with community organizations outside of our service area. And so since these are new relationships in a new community, we wanted to be able to have a commitment, a verbal commitment at this point that we would be supporting their work and then being able to execute those contracts through our CEO.
Right, it's just a little bit odd to me, right? That we're seeing 1.5. I don't question our objective in trying to help decarbonize that particular part of our jurisdiction. But how are we devoting a certain amount and we don't even know what they're going to use it for, other than looking at their qualifications and basing and choosing them based on what they do to the community. Wouldn't that's something that we should have addressed first before you present the board the 1.5 million to disburse?
So I think, just to reiterate, we understand that this is really important to make sure that whatever funds we disperse, whether it's in our own community or a remote community like Hanford, has oversight and really strong contract terms in it that have certain milestones for performance. So those will go in the contract that we will develop. We just haven't developed the contract yet, because if we didn't want to do the work of developing a contract, if we weren't sure that this is something that the board would support, we didn't want to lead that community on and those two organizations on and have them invest a lot of hours, of legal hours, to develop a contract before we actually knew that the board would support this. So our plan is to, just like all the other contracts we do where we disperse funds to our member agencies and everyone else, we will have very strong milestones and oversight in those contracts.
Right, it's just unusual to me. You won't get my support on this one. I don't see what are we going to spend specifically the 1.5 other than our objective to decarbonize the region. What I hope to see is this program. We have chosen these two nonprofit organizations because they have a background or a track record on these kinds of decarbonization efforts that's been going on with the last three organizations that they disbursed money from, other than just approving the 1.5 without even a metrics. To me, I approve. My vote will be earned if we have the amount, we have specific things, or at least programs that this amount will be spent on, and that's how you get my vote.
Mm-hmm.
Without those, I don't believe that I'm ready to disperse on my vote just the 1.5 million.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to Director Lee. You had a comment?
Yes. Thank you so much, Chair. I do want to say thanks to our staff on this very thoughtful and selection of these projects, doing the weatherization, electrification, and also education piece, which is so important in this low income community, especially compared to where we live right here. As much as electrification is something we're so used to right here in Silicon Valley, as seen by so many electric and hybrid cars we are driving on the streets, once you get over Highway 152, it's a different world. In Central Valley, like Fresno, Tulare, and further south to Kings County, those vehicles are far less visible. And it's a land of pickup trucks and gas power cars, right? I think everybody who's nodding, who's been there, drive by, know what I'm talking about. Because I think there's still a lot of doubt about electrification, partly due to lack of understanding or the lack of financial resources to make those changes. And this is exactly what this program is trying to do, is you got to educate and providing resources to the right stakeholder to make that happen. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to go out of our way. This is not our neighboring, this is not where we live. This is about, for those who don't know, it's a 3-hour drive. So for those of you going to Ribbon County, just budget at least 3 hours on the highway, this assuming no traffic. So it's taking a while to get out there. It's just far, and it's a really different part of California. I had the chance to spend extensive time there a decade ago. Then I could tell you that story later, not today on the dais. But Hanford is also a small neighboring community, and I'm very glad to see that this will be a project that will be benefiting many, many thousands of people. And when you say you want to think globally, act locally, this is exactly what we are doing here. So thank you.
Thank you, Director, for those comments. I don't see any others. So I think, Director, Vice Chair, were you going to make a motion?
Yes, I was. First, I just want to say, from this project standpoint, I appreciate this one, and the previous item was all about engagement and commitment in the local communities. And so, especially as Hanford, as we talked about almost a year ago, as board member, or as Director Walia said, it's setting out how we make a real difference in a local community, and whether or not that's labor, or in this case, finding the right partners, finding the right local stakeholders to make a difference. And to me, that's one of the things that we're here for. I appreciate what Director Barbadillo was saying about oversight. I have trust in staff. I have trust in our CEO that we will do the appropriate oversight as far as these two programs. They've done a lot of research into them, and so I think that these will make a positive impact in those communities. So I appreciate all that, and with that, I will move staff recommendation to delegate authority to the CEO to execute contracts with the projects with King's Community Action Organization and Self-Help Enterprises, as staff suggested.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Please, let's do a roll call.
Thank you. Chair Tyson.
Yes.
Vice Chair Klein.
Yes.
Scozola.
Aye.
Fruin.
Aye.
Rennie.
Aye.
Barbadillo.
No.
Martinez Patron.
Yes.
Showalter.
Yes.
Lee.
Aye.
Walia.
Aye.
Hilton.
Aye.
Meadows.
Enthusiastically, aye.
Thank you. Mekachuk.
Aye.
That motion carries with 1 no.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Let's move on then to item number 5 with the regionalization overview. Oh, go ahead, please.
Okay, so regionalization, it's complicated. And I know that one of the objectives that I have as a CEO with the board and community is to try to provide opportunities to kind of raise our all collective knowledge on very complicated topics. And regionalization certainly is one of those complicated topics. And so tonight's presentation by Benna and Chris Van Vector is really to try to get a common understanding about what regionalization is, but it also assumes that you have some basic knowledge about how the California grid works. And that might be a big assumption on our part. So please feel free to ask us questions. This is intended to be an educational discussion. We've also provided you at your spot some more information about regionalization and a little kind of fact sheet, along with the link to CalCCA's website, where they've created a whole page about regionalization and this bill that's been proposed, SB 540. And then lastly, we invited you to a webinar that CalCCA hosted along with some other stakeholders that happened last Monday. The recording is in the works. That also provides more information about regionalization. So we highly encourage you to ask questions, to learn more about this very important initiative, and certainly we'll do our best to answer those questions and make it as simple as possible, but no guarantees. It's complicated. All right, Chris.
Thanks, Monica. Hello, everybody. So we're going to go through a brief discussion of regionalization. Next slide. This is the agenda. We can jump right into it. So what is regionalization? Well, it's nothing new. We've been regionalizing for a while now, over a decade. The first VA that joined CAISO in the energy imbalance market was Pacificor, and that was in 2014. And it was incredibly successful. You can see how the real-time market has grown, right? It's spanning the entire West Coast. Since 2014, this has saved participants over $5 billion by optimizing using CAISO's network. Next slide. Just some context, CAISO is a balancing authority. Not all of California is in CAISO. Not all of CAISO is in California. It's also the largest BA in the West. As a load-serving entity, we are invested in the results that come out of CAISO's market. We bid our load in, and we bid our generating assets in. So we care about the prices. Just as a note, we cannot leave CAISO. We are a member of PG&E's transmission distribution area. We're very much wed to them. They're very much wed to CAISO. We're all in it together. Next slide. Further regionalization has tremendous value. If we move forward with a day-ahead market, it would lower costs by providing more efficient dispatch generating resources, and it would reduce curtailment of renewable resources in California. So this is a slide that was put together by SVCEA, and it's based off a study done by the Brattle Group, and they estimate that it could save up to $790 million annually for California consumers. This also increases reliability. Basically, you just got a bigger pool of resources you can pull from, 25 gigawatts. Reduce greenhouse gas emissions, potential to reduce 11.2% in reduction in California GHG, and a big one here is it would reduce California gas-fired generation by 31%. So what's the problem? Why are we doing this? Right? Sounds great. Well, the problem is on the next slide. Governance is the preeminent issue. CAISO's board is appointed by the California governor. Other western states are reluctant to join a day-ahead market that has this governance structure. State legislature has tried to change this structure before and it has failed twice. There's a new approach that piecemeals functions so that more California advocates can be supportive, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. So it's called the Westwide Pathways Initiative, and this is a multi-step process that essentially identifies functions that these ISOs and RTOs do and allows the creation of a new regional organization, and as approved, those functions move to that new regional organization. That regional organization would have a governance structure which is palatable to other balancing authorities. Lately, the discussion around regionalization is focused on extending the day-ahead market, and that's the dark blue box in the middle between the green and the orange boxes. Next slide. And so this is legislation, right? This was this came out of the Pathways Initiative, and this would allow. It was a multi-stakeholder process. I think everybody was at the table. It's pretty amazing to hear about. Would allow for all benefits from regional markets that we talked about. It would create this new regional organization. CAISO would retain all its traditional activities, and it's supported by a wide range of folks: labor, environmental, and business interests. Everybody really likes this bill, so it's looking good so far. Next slide. So no action needed today. We will work through, SVCEA will work through its political organizations to voice its support of SB 540. As we mentioned, SB 540 creates a path away for CAISO governance of specific functions to transition from CAISO to a regional organization. With SB 540, the RO will be given governance over the day-ahead and real-time markets. Now through September, we'll educate as needed, provide more information about SB 540. If passed in September, this would go to the governor's desk and hopefully signed into law in October. And that's it, I believe. Hopefully I don't have anything else. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Chris. Go ahead, Director Lee.
Just a quick question. Have we taken the position on SB 540, or this is just brand new?
Yes, we did take a position of support on SB 540. This was part of the board-adopted legislative policy platform from last year, so we were able to take that support position.
Great. And based on what you see, it looks like this will pass, correct?
We are cautiously optimistic. You know, it is always hard to get legislation passed through the state legislature, but as Chris mentioned, there are a wide variety of stakeholders who are supportive of this bill, stakeholders that you might not always see together on a piece of legislation. The investor-owned utilities, CCAs, environmental organizations, labor. So we are cautiously optimistic, but we'll be working very hard through our trade association, SVCEA, to ensure that the bill is passed.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the reason I was coming in late today, along with actually Ms. Beltran must have driven a little faster than I did. We were both in Sacramento until like 3 this afternoon and rushed right back in order to make this meeting. But certainly, if you need any type of advocacy, we'll be happy to add to our list of things to advocate up there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Walia, and then Director Showalter.
Thank you. So
And
I
then-
want to not only thank Benna and Chris for your presentation here, also want to thank you for, Monica, for reaching out with the link to the webinar that CalCCA presented Monday afternoon for an hour and a half. That was an excellent webinar, an hour and a half. They had 150 attendees. They said they will be putting the recording on their website as well as the slides. Some of their slides were just excellent. One of the things, I'm going to ask you a question that was repeatedly asked there for everyone's benefit here. And I'm also going to share that I certainly learned even more about the background as to why this is beneficial. And Evie did a great job with that. So I can not recommend it highly enough. If people don't want to spend 90 minutes, certainly spend the first 20 minutes or something to watch that and go through the slides. So the question that was repeatedly asked, and I had the flip side of that question, so I'll ask you both. A question asked was, what happens if there are challenges down the road? Can California come out of this and step back? And I know the answer, but I think it would be helpful if you can help us all understand. And I'll add my question. What if the other parties step out later on from the regionalization effort, if that entity is formed? Then what is the impact for the state of California?
Yes, you can. There is an escape clause, for lack of a better term, for this process. And it is an optional market for everybody else. That is part of the difficulty of this discussion. We kind of talked about it a little bit earlier. We're in it. We're not leaving. Like, we're a part of CAISO. And so that relinquishing that governance structure has been very hard for California because of that. So if they leave, then the market would contract. It would be a little smaller. But we would still have the ability to expand again, which is important.
I see. And of course, it's in everybody's interest to find the right structure that works for everyone.
Yeah, and the bigger the market, the better it's going to perform. That's just the nature of this type of optimization. The more transmission, the more you can optimize, the more you can get in, the better pricing.
Okay.
Thank you. Can I add something too? I think one of the main things that was certainly addressed many times in the webinar, but we didn't address here, is like, what happens if we don't form this regional operator? Like, what happens, right? What if it's just like a status quo? Is a status quo a thing? Well, the reality is that there are other markets being formed to compete against this regional operator. There's one called the Markets Plus or the Southwest Power Pool. They've got a lot of traction too. And essentially, they're going to be competing for size. And the bigger the size, the more diversity, the more opportunity to pool and optimize our resources and avoid curtailments, because that's what we're really trying to do here. So if this effort doesn't pass, then California stands to become more and more of an island, kind of like a Texas. And we saw what happened with Texas when they lost power, right?
Yeah.
We don't want to be an island. We want to expand our footprint and have many more counterparties and markets to share our wonderful resources with. So this is why it's really important that this pass. And I also want to give a huge plug to CalCCA on this. The Pathway Initiative, the way it stands, and then leading into the Becker bill, wouldn't have happened without CalCCA. So earlier on the consent agenda, you approved an item related to CalCCA. And I've had many questions about what is the value of CalCCA. This is a value that CalCCA and only CalCCA can take credit for. They led the Pathway Initiative. They got the right stakeholders to the table. They got them to speak. They got them to agree to something that would work for everyone. So I give huge kudos to Evie and to Beth Vaughn and the CalCCA team on this.
Thank you for sharing that. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Great, thank you. Director Showalter.
Yeah, I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about what people were outside of California were concerned of about our governance. Was it because it was governor appointed, or what were the concerns that they brought, and generally how are we going to reorganize to do it another way that makes people happy?
Well, the regional organization will have its own set of appointees, which won't be appointed by the governor. I think the concern was really about California policies and states not necessarily having as aggressive GHG goals. That's not really an issue in the Northwest, but in some of the Southwest states, and as you go further north, that can be an issue.
So who would appoint the members of the board?
I'd have to go look at the structure, but it would be voted. I would have to go. I can get back to you on the actual answer.
Thank you.
Okay. Gosh, Director Meadows' hand you went down, so I'll assume it's still down. Any other comments or questions? I do not see any. Did I take public comment? I did. All right, so that was for information. What am I looking at? I can't see. Brian, I don't. Director Mekachuk, I don't see your hand up. Oh, there it is. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I first started to understand regionalization at the CalCCA conference, I think it was last year or the year before, in San Jose. And curtailment to me is a crime, and anything that reduces curtailment is a good thing. And I'm really glad to see that Senator Becker is moving forward with this, and he's got a lot of support. And I think we at SVCE have developed a good rapport with Senator Becker, so we should always show support for that. And I guess my question is, have we, SVCEA I think is the largest CCA, and are they behind this 100%? That's maybe a question for Bennett.
I don't know if 3CE took an individual position on this bill, but I do know that CalCCA has been, as Monica mentioned, a really strong supporter. So our collective trade association really has been at the forefront of advancing this legislation.
Thank you.
Great. Director Rennie, then.
One thing that's confusing me is your picture here of all the states, which goes way beyond the WEC. I think I've got the term right. And it even includes Texas, which I thought wasn't even connected to any other states. So and Alaska, which has got another country in the way. So I'm really trying to understand how many states do we think are going to participate in it? Is it really just the WEC? Is it all of that? Is it beyond?
Yeah, that diagram came from just it was a McKinsey publication, I believe, that showed net imports by state, and California is basically the biggest importer in the country. And it really just was kind of showing how interconnected we are already to the West. And I think that's, the challenge. If we become islanded, what does that look like, right?
And one of the advantages we keep talking about is not curtailing our solar, but a lot of the other ones on here are going to be big solar producers also. I'd expect Nevada, probably certainly Arizona. So who are we selling the solar to? Or is it going to be Idaho, since they're the other
So the
importer here?
potential entrance into EDAM, which is the day-ahead market for CAISO, the committed ones are Portland General Electric, Pacificor. The ones interested are the utility in Nevada, New Mexico, and so it's a kind of that southwest portion. The utility in Arizona, Arizona Public Service, I believe, is more interested in Markets Plus.
And so what I heard from that list was Portland, which is probably a lot of hydro, so they would just maybe not run as much hydro when we could send them solar, and then they could send us back some hydropower later on, so then it would kind of work out.
Yep.
But we can't really do that now so much, or?
We can. It's more about the way the transmission is optimized. And so when you participate in this market, you're allocating transmission to the algorithm. And then it optimizes based off that. So it sees patterns that I'm not going to see, you're not going to see, because we're not that smart.
But it sounds like for it really to take advantage of it, we're probably going to need to build some more transmission.
we could need to build some more. I think existing transmission already is there. It's just optimized differently. This is a problem when MRTU, the CAISO market first went live. Operators would look at what CAISO is doing and they would question those results. And so it became a while for CAISO to actually get people to realize this dispatch makes sense, right? It's the right thing to do. It's the least costly method. But I don't think we would need to build a lot of transmission because there's a lot of existing transmission there.
Yeah, so I think the bill's a great idea. I'm just trying to decide how excited to get about how fast something's actually going to change.
Yeah, I can add to, like, one of the very successful market that the CalISO has been operating now for 10 years is the energy imbalance market. And it's a real-time market, right? It's more of a in the day. And there's lots of participants in EIM or beyond just the CalISO, and that's what makes it so successful. Now, the disadvantage that the energy imbalance market has is that it's a real-time market. It cannot be for tomorrow or a day ahead. And so that's the growth of this. It goes from being real-time, like in the hour, to being tomorrow. And as Chris mentioned, in order for you to guarantee that you can balance or move power back and forth tomorrow, you need to lock up transmission. So that's the big enhancement here, is the ability to schedule it on a day-ahead basis and to commit transmission in an optimal way. So, but we've already been doing this within the hour for years.
Thank you.
Director Lee?
Yeah, so the way I understand it's actually on the issue of transmission is that if we are doing it, or we sign up to do it, by having that ability to move so quickly back and forth, it actually would reduce our need to build more transmission lines. Am I correct in that understanding? So I think that's why this is such a good thing by having to do that, because as we all know, PG&E is one that run the transmission line and we get the bills, right? Everybody get the same bill for PG&E's cost of doing that. And so this is really a way of getting more efficiency, or I always try to look at it as like maybe like a pipe. In this case, you're making these pipes more available throughout the day and not restricting it. So by having it being more available and speed of electricity travel near the speed of light, you know, that's why it's so exciting that this is something that that we need. And then of course, the larger, right, the footprint, that gives us more sources of the energy that we could get from. And actually, kind of interesting looking at this table here to see that some of dark green is Texas. Actually generates so much electric generation that people really, and they're actually saying that they are one of the largest states as having more solar plants being built recently. So I thought that was quite educational. Thank you.
Great. I don't see any other hands raised, so I want to say thank you very much for that informative presentation. And we will move on now to item number 6, local agency action planning.
Try again. No? No?
The next one. Grab the one to your left, maybe.
Thank you. I'm going to phone a friend. Okay, so, good evening. I'm Anthony Ullo. I am not Zoe Elizabeth. Normally she bounds up and gives this presentation, but she is on a well-deserved vacation, so tonight you're stuck with me. Next slide, please. All right, as you know, we do this every 2 months, and we're here to provide you a status report on our efforts to work on policy and permits with all of your agencies. Next slide, please. Last month, when you were talking about the budget, I remember there was a discussion about, well, what's the most effective thing that we do? And you see lots of numbers, and you know, Justin likes to talk about all the money that his team spends and giving out rebates and things. But in actuality, and I just poked fun at my friend there, but in actuality, the most effective thing we've done is what you all did when you passed REACH codes. So the REACH codes passed in 2019 and renewed in 2022 have achieved this outstanding numbers here that you see before you on the screen. So literally thousands of of heat pump water heaters were installed because of reach codes in our region, things that we would never reach in a normal rebate style program. So the policy levers that you have been applying are our most effective thing that we've done, and we can only do it in partnership with you. So you all, those votes that you took, some of them were more painful than others. All of you, by taking those votes, you made the impact. You reduced the pollution in your communities and in our region, and for that, you should feel gratified that the vote was worth it. But now we're going to move on to existing buildings, which is a little bit more difficult, and that's the fun part here. Next slide, please. So as you know, the board has previously allocated $4 million for policy development work and permit modernization, and we're in the middle of implementing those actions. Next slide, please. Or I can do this? Jeez, I should. Who knew? I'm usually back at home watching Zoe do this.
Self-serve.
Works so well. Self-serve. These are the types of practices. You've seen this before. We don't need to go over it. And this is the results of the action plans. They're all finalized. And I have to say, Supervisor Lee, the county was the last agency to finalize. But boy, with gangbusters, you're now taking the lead in implementing things, and your staff is to be complimented. So we have 2 trainings scheduled for the upcoming month with all of your staff in development services, which is terrific.
Yay.
In addition, Dr. Fruin, we just got the word today, literally, that the state has approved your new performance-based reach code. And Gilroy, Director Hilton, if you're still on, we are working with Hippolito on some modifications to your permitting front face on your website and things. We have a consultant working with Hippolito on that. And we'll be working more with all of the agencies. So now we'll start talking about existing buildings. And with the REACH code effort this year, we have before us the option to really look at existing buildings. And before you, you can see one retrofit policy that can have a tremendous impact. So we call it AC to heat pump. And what it means is that when someone's installing a new air conditioner in a building or replacing an existing air conditioner, they would be required to put in instead a heat pump. So heat pumps do cost a little bit more. The labor is the same, in general. It's the same device almost. It just runs in 2 directions. Instead of cooling, it both cools and heats. And in doing so, that building will then be prepared for a time when they won't be able to buy a gas furnace. So it makes a tremendous amount of sense to not invest any more in just one-way air conditioning units and instead require everything to be 2-way heat pumps. So if all of our agencies were to adopt an AC to heat pump mandate along with your 2025 building code, that could result in 15,000 new heat pumps being developed over the next 3 years. It could save $120 million in redundant equipment costs and $54 million in on-bill savings. So those are some pretty nice numbers. And so if you wonder about what is that redundant equipment cost, well, here's what happens is someone buys an air conditioner next year, they install it, no problem. Well, then 3 years later, their heater goes out and they're told they can't buy a gas furnace. Then they're faced with having to rip out that air conditioner they just purchased and install a heat pump because they can't install a gas furnace because due to the air district's rules, they're not for sale here anymore. They can't legally be installed. And so by avoiding that unhappy outcome, that's just one path that makes sense. There's 2 other paths for existing buildings that we want to talk to you about. One is to require, whenever a building is modified, to require it to be pre-wired. So in other words, if someone's ripping out their kitchen, maybe you're still going to let them put in a gas stove. But boy, when they have the drywall open, it's the perfect time to put conduit in there and an electrical line so that they can go to electric cooking sometime in the future. The same thing with any modification. Take advantage of the contractor being on site, the electrician being on site. Take advantage. And by the way, under your approval, we offer $500 per circuit to that customer for pre-wiring, up to a maximum of $2,000. For income qualified customers, they earn even more. But $500 a circuit is a pretty attractive rebate when someone's already has someone on their home at their home doing that. So that's a second sort of effort and rule. And the third would be a little more complex, which is, it's called a flex path ordinance, which requires when a building is modified, people to get a certain, it's a list of criteria basically, and they'd have to get a certain score to proceed through the permitting process on the building remodel. So those are the three things that we're going to be advancing for you and with your staff, along with the 2025 building code adoption effort. All right, next slide, please. So I want to close by just saying your efforts do matter, as you know, but they really do. And we will continue to work with your staff to work on any sensible actions and to support them in any way we can. And we'll pivot as circumstances evolve. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Director Showalter.
Yeah, I understand that the state building code is going to be changed this summer too, right? It's the regular update. So how does this fit in? What are we expecting the state building code to say, or do we know? We must know.
Thanks, Director Showalter. So the 2020, so yes, it's time for the state building code to be adopted every 3 years. The 2025 building code is awesome. It basically bakes in the approach of using heat pumps for single-family and multifamily residences. So it starts with them in the analysis. So we really like the 2025 building code. It's essentially equivalent to the energy performance code that I just mentioned in Cupertino adopted. So the 2025 building code is pretty darn good. It really acknowledges the work that we've done to prove that these things work. So that'll be statewide for the 25 code. It does not require induction cooking. There's still, it doesn't require all electric construction, but it does require the biggest uses of natural gas in a home to be electric, which is water heating and space heating. Related to that is research that shows that about up to 80% of new homes permitted in this state are going all electric anyway. And that's not related to, there isn't reach codes covering all of those, but that the market is going all electric, which is really great news that we can all celebrate. So the 2025 code is adopted by the state already. They are now in the publishing stage, and it should be presented to your building departments for adoption this fall. And that is when we will be working with your staff, because basically both you and your staff like to just do reach codes and building code all in one sitting, as opposed to, you know, having several meetings dedicated to that topic. Now, if you've heard about a piece of state legislation, AB 306, that kind of changes the dynamic of the building code adoption. But it is our understanding that the authors of AB 306, including the Speaker of the Assembly, intend for the 2025 building code adoption to go through as planned, but it would currently, in its current form, disallow reach codes. So you saw Benna come up. Maybe you didn't notice her. She moves quickly like a cat, but she's here in case you had any questions on our lobbying efforts on AB 306.
Sure, while you're here, tell us about 306. We would love to hear.
Yes. So Tony did a great job describing what AB 306 would do. This is a bill that SVCE, along with other CCAs, including Peninsula Clean Energy and San Jose Clean Energy, issued a concerns letter and really outlined 2 amendment suggestions for the authors of the bill to consider. One is a clarification on the point that Tony just made. It's our understanding that the intention is to allow the 2025 state building code to go through. So our amendment language just makes it crystal clear that that is allowed, and that local governments can adopt the 2025 state building code. The other amendment that we have proposed to the authors is to narrow the 6-year moratorium on local reach codes to just new construction. That way, as Tony mentioned, our member agencies can continue to pursue existing building reach codes like the AC to heat pump item that Tony brought up.
And if I can add on, just
Yeah,
to explain that the author of the bill is really intent on making it easier to produce new housing by kind of freezing the building code so builders know what they're, so we say, well, if you care about freezing it for new housing, don't mess with existing, because that really doesn't have anything to do with housing production. Makes that perfect sense to us.
I think so. I don't see, okay.
I guess the further follow-up question is, after you said that to the Speaker's office, what was the response?
So we've had good conversations with both Assemblymember Schultz and Speaker Rivas about these issues. To date, we have not seen any amendments in print that address our issues. We understand that conversations are ongoing. The bill was recently passed out of the Assembly and is now in the Senate. I think there will be continual policy conversations as the bill moves through committee, where we will have an opportunity to continue those conversations. But we very much want to work with the Speaker. As Tony said, we also agree that housing is an important need, and we want to make sure that housing supply is advanced and there's more houses, right? We think there's a way to craft the bill so that you really achieve that objective while allowing local jurisdictions to work on policies, especially around existing buildings, that can continue to advance their environmental goals.
Great. Director Martinez Beltran.
Thank you. So just following up on that, you know, what we heard today is, so it will, I mean, is there a set time that it's going to pause? Like it'll pause for 5 years, it'll pause for 10 years, and then we have no reach codes during that time?
Can I answer? So, yes, there are dates in the bill. We believe the dates that are in the bill now don't make sense, or at least they don't align with what the author's office said that they intended. So, what's really clear for sure is that they want to freeze out the 2028 building code, new building code that should come out 3 years from now.
Okay.
That's super clear. What's not clear is whether they want to also stop the 2031 update. And the dates as they are now imply that they do, but I thought they said they didn't. So there's a little bit of ambiguity there. So if they don't do that, if they don't clear that up, it could potentially be 9 years between building codes. And there's a lot of concern that that will put our state way out of whack with developments that happen in national codes. So anything to add, Bennett? Okay. And the reach codes would similarly, you'd be prohibited from adopting a reach code after June of this year until 2031.
Okay. And so
currently,
if it stays through the 2028, is that something that we feel does further what it is that they're looking to accomplish, which is streamline housing and get more housing built with taking out some of those barriers, while also allowing us to stay current on some of the environmental changes that we need to be making?
Well, I'll answer with our very specific policy goals. I'll just repeat what Ben has said. We want to clarify the dates and have reach codes for existing buildings proceed.
Right.
There's many members of the environmental advocacy community that have other concerns and a broader viewpoint, but ours are those.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Director Showalter.
I have another question. So when they talk about freezing the building code for reach codes, are they only talking about freezing the building code for reach codes, or just freezing the building code? Because
all local amendments.
Okay, because we've just had this huge wildfire in California, and there is a okay.
So I misspoke. Not all local amendments. So amendments for home hardening would be allowed, as well as amendments that reflect what you already have on the books as of this January.
In addition, any emergency fire-related items would still be allowed. There are 3 exemptions in the bill for locals to adopt different codes. So home hardening, emergency fire-related issues, and then the grandfathering in of existing building REACH codes locally.
Thank you.
But water conservation, for example, would, like energy, not be allowed.
Can I just clarify too? You said this January, meaning this 2025, this 2020?
2025.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see if there's any public comment. I do not see any in the room and not there. Okay. With that, this is for discussion, and we've had a very nice discussion. In fact, we've had a really good meeting, I gotta say. And so with that, let's move on to board member announcements and direction on future agenda items. Do we have anything that people wish to say? What's that?
Very quick.
Okay, go ahead, Director.
Sure.
Vice Chair.
I'll be very quick. So I just want to thank SVCE staff for coming to our Earth Day celebration over the weekend. We had over 30 partners, including Supervisor Lee's staff there, but it was really great. You know, hundreds of residents, and you know, it was a little bit of everything from, you know, clean energy to tree planting to, you know, so many, you know, being emergency preparedness. It was really a great event. So thank you to staff, and thanks to everybody who attended.
Great. I don't see any other comments. So with that, thank you all, and we are now adjourned.
Recording stopped.
No.